It all begins with an almost imperceptible crack, an instant when the air seems heavier than it should be, and time bends around an undefined sensation. Something is out of place. You spill your coffee, forget a name, feel an irritation without cause. Small flaws, trivial details, but repeated enough to suggest that there is an invisible hand moving the pieces of your routine. It's the kind of day when reality seems to creak inside, as if it wanted to warn you, pay attention. Carl Jung said that what we deny in ourselves returns in the form of destiny. Perhaps that's it. Perhaps the universe is not an indifferent sequence of coincidences, but a language, alive, pulsating, coded, trying to lead us back to the forgotten center. What we call bad luck, perhaps, is just synchronicity, making itself heard through crooked paths, trying to restore the lost harmony between what we are and what we pretend to be. But how many of us heed that call? How many truly pause in the face of discomfort to ask, why is this happening? Most people are just rushing. We attribute the chaos to external factors, traffic, the boss, tiredness, time, never to ourselves. We pretend that everything is fortuitous, that there isn't a symbolic thread connecting the coincidences, when, deep down, we know there is. Because there is a point, a frequency, a dissonant note that repeats itself until it is heard. Some feel this presence as a constant restlessness, a slight inner tremor, a nostalgia for something they can't name. Others perceive it in the repetition of numbers, in improbable encounters, in persistent dreams that awaken them before dawn. These are coded messages, coming from what Jung called the collective unconscious, that immense web of symbols that unites all minds like rivers converging into the same ocean. There, in the depths, lie the archetypes, the eternal forms that move our stories without our realizing it. Imagine for a moment that your life is a broken mirror. Each fragment reflects a piece of who you were, what you fear, and what you can still become. In each reflection, there is a version of yourself calling for attention, and every now and then, when two of these images align perfectly, something rare happens, the moment of synchronicity. That's when the universe whispers, now. It's an almost imperceptible touch, but unmistakable for those who have already learned to recognize the sound of meaningful coincidences. However, we resist. Our rational mind wants to dominate the mystery, to explain, classify, control. We prefer to believe that everything is statistics, that coincidences are merely chance playing dice in the dark, and in doing so, we close the door through which the sacred tries to enter. It's like plugging our ears to an ancient melody, forgetting that the song comes from within. Jung saw in this forgetfulness the root of modern alienation. Man has lost contact with the symbolic, with the invisible, with the living language of the soul. But the invisible doesn't give up easily. It persists, sometimes subtly, sometimes brutally. If the signs are ignored, they turn into a crisis. Resistance that was merely a nuisance becomes exhaustion. Work that once seemed like a project becomes a prison. The body falls ill, sleep is fragmented, relationships become labyrinths. Everything that was under control begins to crumble. And in the midst of this collapse, a question arises that cuts like a blade. Why is all this happening to me? It is at this point that the first door opens. Jung would call it the threshold of the shadow, the inevitable encounter with what we repress. Every pain has a symbolic form. Every failure is an inverted mirror pointing to something we refuse to see. Life, contrary to what we imagine, does not want to punish us, but to integrate us. It pushes us to the limit so that we can look inward and recognize what we project onto the world. That is why patterns repeat themselves. They change the people, the places change, but the plot is always the same until you understand the role we play in it. How many times have you found yourself saying, "This always happens to me," as if you were a victim of endless repetition? But what if what repeats itself isn't chance, but a symbol asking to be understood? What if each obstacle is a map drawn by your own soul, guiding you in the direction you resisted following? The universe doesn't speak in words, it speaks in mirrors. It speaks in the silence that follows a mistake, in the gaze that pierces through the crowd and time, in the coincidences that defy logic. There is a moment, however, when everything aligns for a brief second. It's as if time breathes along with you. It's the instant when symbol and event coincide, when the external and the internal reflect each other with precision. Jung described this as synchronicity, a bridge between the physical and psychic worlds, a silent proof that chance is merely the mask of meaning. When this happens, the heart recognizes it before the mind. There is a tremor, a shiver, a feeling of return. But this return requires courage, because heeding the call is admitting that there is something beyond the surface, and not everyone is ready to cross the mirror. The truth is not comfortable. It disarms the ego, dissolves certainties, and shows that control is only a fragile illusion. Yet, it is only after this rupture that true awakening is born. The chaos we considered punishment reveals itself as initiation. The collapse was the invitation. Jung believed that the soul speaks in symbols because they preserve mystery, preventing the sacred from becoming banal. Thus, each seemingly insignificant event is a letter in a language that reason has forgotten. To relearn this language is to relearn how to live. It is to realize that coincidence is not noise, but a musical score. That life is not a straight line, but a spiral, moving in cycles that repeat themselves until they become consciousness. And perhaps now, as you read these words, something within you also stirs. An ancient memory, an echo of experiences you never knew how to name. Because we are all, at some point, called to cross the same portal, that of listening. Not to the external world, but to the secret vibration that connects each event to a hidden purpose. Life does not communicate with the human voice. It speaks through what insists. And what insists is always what needs to be understood. So the next time everything seems to go wrong, don't curse chance. Observe. There's a pattern there, a recurring symbol, a story begging to be deciphered. Maybe the universe isn't against you, maybe it's just trying to wake you up. Ultimately, it's always the same call, repeated in different voices. Stop, look, listen. There's something sacred trying to emerge from your discomfort. And if you dare to listen, you might realize that it's not the world that's crumbling. It's just the veil that's being torn. Because a true beginning is never gentle. It arrives like a jolt, a noise within the order, a signal that tears through the everyday and reveals the invisible. And it is there, at that exact point between fear and mystery, that the journey begins. Can you feel it? The air has changed. Something is watching you from the other side of the mirror. But be careful. The next step will require you to look inward without looking away. What is about to emerge is not the world, it's you. There are times when life seems to mock us with disconcerting precision. You move to a new city, change jobs and a relationship, and for a brief moment believe that now everything will be different. But the new boss has the same authoritarian gaze as the previous one. The new relationship repeats the same wounds as the old one, and old fears find new masks to continue living inside you. It's as if the world reconfigures itself only to return the same scenario with new actors. And then comes the question that echoes, tired, almost a whisper. Why is this happening again? Carl Jung called this cycle of return the active projection of the unconscious. What is not resolved within manifests itself outside, insistently, patiently, until it is seen. The universe, he said, never tires of teaching. It is we who tire of learning. Repetition is not punishment, it is revelation. It is the way the soul tries to show itself through the mirrors of experience. Each encounter with the same type of person, each recurring obstacle, is an unfinished sentence that destiny repeats until the meaning is understood. A man once recounted how, for years, he had run from authoritarian bosses. From company to company, he found himself trapped under the same figure. Harsh voices, excessive demands, subtle humiliations. He thought the corporate world was cruel by nature, until the day he realized that, in his own home, he had grown up under the shadow of a father who told him what he should be and feel. He wasn't running from a boss, he was running from the mirror. When he understood this, when he finally looked at the frightened boy who still inhabited him, the pattern ceased. The next boss he encountered was different. Or perhaps he was the one who was different, finally reconciled with his own inner authority. Life repeats what has not been assimilated. It's like a lesson interrupted by a student's escape. The teacher, the universe, the unconscious destiny, doesn't pursue him out of revenge but out of pedagogical love. As long as the lesson remains unlearned, the same exercise returns, sometimes in a new form, but always with the same symbolic content. Jung saw in this process the path of individuation, the journey by which the being becomes who he is, by integrating what he had left aside. And yet, there are those who live entirely within this cycle, without ever realizing it. They repeat loves that end in the same abyss, friendships that betray in the same way, choices that lead them to the same exhaustion. The rational mind calls this bad luck, but the soul knows its persistence. Destiny speaks through recurrence, and what repeats itself is always what cries out for awareness. Perhaps that's why sometimes daily life turns into a labyrinth. You wake up, work, talk, smile, but you feel that something is out of sync. Situations seem to change color, but not form. Everything is too familiar. The same arguments, the same mistakes, the same justifications. It's as if a shadow roams the days, rewriting the same plot on different stages. And within this repetition grows a weariness that is not just physical. It's the weight of carrying what has not yet been released. This tiredness has a subtle name, exhaustion of the soul. It's not cured by sleep nor by vacations. It's the fatigue of maintaining a persona that no longer wants to exist, waking up and putting on the mask of normality when the spirit already begs for silence. Jung said that when life becomes unbearable, it's because the true self is trying to be born. Suffering in this context is childbirth. Exhaustion is the sign that vital energy has been diverted too far from what is authentic. Imagine a woman who, from a young age, learned to smile to please. She made it an art, a shield. She became efficient, admired, useful, but empty. Her kindness was a disguised battlefield. With each "it's okay" said without feeling, she lost a fragment of her own soul. And one day, for no apparent reason, she woke up and couldn't get up. Her body wisely paralyzed the theater. The illness was the cry that her mind censored. It was only there, in forced immobility, that she heard the truth. The weariness didn't come from doing too much, but from a lack of being. The universe doesn't speak in phrases, but in symptoms. And the clearest symptom that we've strayed from what's essential is profound exhaustion, the kind that even rest can't resolve. It's the body saying, "You're living against yourself." Jung believed that the unconscious possesses a kind of autonomous wisdom, and that when the ego insists on a false path, this wisdom intervenes, creating obstacles, repetitions, and collapses, not as punishment, but as realignment. The soul, after all, desires wholeness, and what doesn't cooperate with this purpose will gradually dissolve. And when that happens, isolation draws near. Conversations lose their flavor. People seem distant, as if speaking a different language. You are present, but not whole. You feel like you're observing your own life from the outside, as if something is switched off. It's disconnection, the final symptom of a soul that has strayed too far from its own source. And paradoxically, it is in this solitude that the call becomes most audible. The silence begins to vibrate with hidden meanings. Coincidences multiply, dreams gain clarity, common gestures are imbued with omens. But up to this point, everything is still just a warning. The true awakening begins when, amidst fatigue and isolation, understanding arises. Nothing that repeats itself is by chance. Everything is a mirror. Life itself is a coded dialogue between what you show and what you hide. The authoritarian boss is your unacknowledged power. The distant partner is your own refusal to listen to yourself. The world, in truth, is a theater of reflections, and each encounter is merely the unconscious trying to recognize itself through the other. However, there is a silent turning point when you accept looking in the mirror without looking away. Something changes immediately. almost imperceptibly. The pattern that once imprisoned you begins to dissolve, as if the game has finally been understood. It is at this moment that the universe, patient and serene, whispers, "As learned, we can continue." The lesson is no longer repeated because it has already been integrated. The enemy disappears. The cycle breaks, not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. Jung asserted that external destiny is merely a projection of the inner landscape. When there is harmony within, the outside world reorganizes itself. When there is acceptance, opposites cease to fight, and what was once conflict transforms into understanding. Repetition, then, is no longer necessary. The mirror has been returned, the image restored. But to reach that point, one must cross the desert of consciousness. One must endure repetition without becoming cynical. One must see exhaustion not as weakness, but as a compass. And one must accept solitude as the womb of the new. Because the universe does not cease dialogue, it only changes tone. When everything seems to cease, it is a sign that something is germinating in the invisible. The cycle of repetition is, therefore, the laboratory of the soul. In it, each failure is a reagent, each pain a reaction, and the final result is the emergence of the true self. But few endure the heat of this process. Many give up before the transformation, preferring the comfort of the known to the uncertainty of the new. And so they live prisoners of the same plot, believing that life is unfair, when, in truth, it is only faithful to the mirror shown to them. Be honest. How many times have you felt like everything was repeating itself? That, no matter how much the scenery changed, something essential remained the same. This feeling isn't failure. It's a sign that the cycle isn't complete yet. Life is waiting for you to see what you've always avoided, to name what hasn't yet been named, to embrace what you've always rejected. Only then will the mirror stop reflecting pain and start reflecting meaning. And perhaps it is precisely at that moment, when you recognize your own shadow without running away, that silence transforms into understanding. The weight lessens, the repetition ceases, and what once seemed like punishment reveals itself as a journey. But beware, the end of a cycle is never the end of the journey. When the mirror quiets down and the reflection stabilizes, something new begins to pulsate on the edges of reality. A deeper calling is approaching, a movement that will demand not only observation but surrender, because life, when understood, doesn't repeat itself. It deepens. And what comes next? It's no longer a mirror. It's the dive. There comes a point when the mask clings so tightly to the face that it's impossible to distinguish where the disguise ends and the true face begins. You smile, you speak, you fulfill your social roles, and everyone believes you're fine. But there's something subtle, almost invisible, that betrays the absence of soul. It's a gaze that doesn't hold, a gesture slightly out of sync, a presence that seems to be there only out of obligation. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. There's a gap, a flaw in the vibration, and at the heart of this lack, the universe begins to move. Because that which is false cannot remain whole for long. The energy that sustains it is the same that dissolves it. Carl Jung said that when an individual identifies excessively with their persona, the social mask we use to survive, the unconscious reacts, creating ruptures and symptoms to restore balance. The disconnection we feel from others is nothing more than a reflection of our own disconnection. And the price of this division is high. Without truth, no encounter is possible. Relationships become opaque mirrors, conversations become empty, affections lose density. The isolated self, believing itself to be independent, forgets that everything that exists lives in relation. A leaf is a leaf because it has a tree. The tree exists because there is earth. And we exist because there is the invisible sustaining us, silently, between each beat. But what if this disconnection isn't just an emotional symptom? What if it's the prelude to a profound change, a necessary dismantling so that something new can emerge? What happens when the universe decides to return us to our essence, even if it means dismantling everything we believed ourselves to be. Chaos begins subtly, like a crack in the familiar ground. The car breaks down, the computer crashes, the project that seemed solid collapses without warning. These are banal events, but with a suspicious frequency, as if there were a hidden purpose behind the collapse. At first, you try to fix, control, adjust. You believe it's just bad luck, coincidence, chance. But when the rhythm of the failures intensifies, when everything you built with so much effort begins to crumble in sequence, something inside you finally whispers, it's not the world that's breaking down. It's what no longer serves its purpose being discarded. This is where the journey becomes dangerous and revealing. Because the chaos we always fear is actually the secret work of the sacred. It clears the ground. It dislodges what no longer belongs. It is the invisible farmer who uproots the old harvest to prepare the land for what is to come. Jung saw this as a phase of symbolic death, the collapse of the old self, of the constructed identity, of the psychological structure that has become obsolete. And like all death, it comes with pain, confusion, and resistance. But chaos is generous in its cruelty. It destroys only what prevents life from continuing. Nothing that is true in you will be lost. Only what was a mask. Only what was fear. Only what was dead, pretending to live. How many times have you tried to hold on to something that was already slipping away? A job, a relationship, an ideal, an image of yourself. And the more you cling, the heavier everything becomes. The more the universe takes it upon itself to show that it cannot remain. Why do we insist so much on protecting what no longer has a soul? It is at this point that the body begins to speak. First in murmurs, a slight pain, a constant tension, a diffuse discomfort. You ignore it. Then come the cries, insomnia, chronic fatigue, unexplained aches and pains, sudden crises. The body, this forgotten oracle, tries to translate into physical language what the mind refuses to acknowledge. Jung said that the body is the stage where the unconscious represents its truths when it finds no other way to be heard. Each symptom is a living metaphor, a symbol asking for translation. Pain, far from being an enemy, is a messenger. It doesn't want to punish you. It wants to awaken you. What if your body were the last voice in the universe trying to communicate with you? What if every pain were a word from a sacred text that you insist on not reading? There are people who live anesthetized, believing they can silence their bodies as if they were a peripheral nuisance. But the body is the temple of the unconscious. It knows before the mind when something is out of harmony. That's why, when one's whole life seems to crumble, the body falls ill. Not from fragility, but from an excess of lucidity. It carries the weight of what the soul can no longer bear. And sometimes, only when we are lying down, immobilized by pain, do we finally hear what we previously avoided hearing. We can't go on like this anymore. And then something unexpected happens. In the midst of the collapse between fear and exhaustion, small flashes of meaning emerge. Coincidences. Improbable encounters. A book falling from the shelf, open to the exact phrase you needed. A stranger saying something that resonates as an answer. A dream that casually repeats the same symbol the previous day showed you. These are fragments of a larger language, what Jung called synchronicity. These moments don't obey logic. They don't ask for proof. They ask for perception. They are signs that the invisible has begun to move in your direction, aligning the external and the internal in a secret dance. They are small confirmations that there is a thread connecting everything, even what seems like ruin. But what do you do when the coincidence is too clear to ignore? When the world seems to respond to you with disconcerting precision, as if each gesture were part of an ancient dialogue. The first reaction is doubt. The mind tries to dismiss it. It's just chance, it's just imagination. But the more you observe, the more you perceive the rhythm. Signs become frequent, almost musical. Everything that was once noise begins to compose a coherent melody. The universe, once distant, reveals itself as intimate. It's as if reality itself had a consciousness, and was discreetly conspiring to guide you back to the center. At this point, fear and awe intertwine, because realizing that the world has an intention is also realizing that there is nowhere left to run. Life is speaking directly to you, and each response demands change. Each synchronicity is an invitation, confides. But trusting is the greatest risk. It means relinquishing control and allowing something deeper to guide the next step. Jung saw in this act of surrender the beginning of real transformation, the moment when the ego, tired of fighting, gives way to wholeness. It is the instant when the individual ceases to be a fragment trying to survive and becomes a channel through which the whole expresses itself. Can you imagine what it would be like to live like that, without masks, without resistance, in constant flow with what is? There is no stability in this state, but there is truth. And truth, however uncomfortable it may be, liberates. Ruin becomes revelation. Pain transforms into direction. The body becomes a compass. Coincidences become a map. Everything that seemed fragmented begins to unite under the same silent vibration. And little by little, perception changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this happening to me for?" The difference between the two questions is the difference between despair and awakening. The first seeks culprits, the second seeks meaning. And it is in this internal shift that chaos finally fulfills its function, to destroy what is false in order to make room for the real. But there is still something beyond the apparent reality. A final veil, thin, almost translucent, separating you from the total vision. And this veil cannot be torn away by effort. It only dissolves when you learn to listen in absolute silence. Because the universe, after screaming in repetitions, weariness, pain, and ruin, begins to speak in another way, through stillness. It is in this interval between collapse and rebirth that the most dangerous question of all arises. Who am I when everything I pretended to be has already fallen apart? This question is the gate. No answer is possible without going through it, and whoever goes through it never returns the same. Because the collapse, in fact, was not the end. It was purification. And what is about to be born is not the old self restored. It is something you never were, but were always destined to be. There are moments when the world seems to conspire around an invisible meaning. Small events align as if obeying a secret logic, and the impossible begins to seem natural. You think of someone you haven't seen in years, and they call. A book falls open to the exact page that answers the question that has been haunting you for weeks. An inexplicable delay prevents an accident that would have changed everything. It's as if the universe breathes along with you, modulating time and space in sync with your inner state. Carl Jung observed this phenomenon and called it synchronicity, a bridge between the outer and inner worlds, a reminder that nothing is truly separate. But there's a detail that few understand. Synchronicities don't just appear to enchant, they appear to redirect. They are symbolic crossroads, decision points where the invisible tries to guide you, even if the mind still resists. Imagine a traveler lost in a dense forest. He walks for hours until he begins to notice subtle signs, a recurring sound in the distance, a marked tree, a wind pattern that always blows from the same direction. At first he ignores them, but when these signs repeat themselves, he begins to follow them, and in doing so, he finds the path that leads him back to the light. Synchronicity is that kind of sign, not a magical intervention, but a profound guidance. It appears when the individual is at a crossroads, when the soul and the ego vie for control. Each meaningful coincidence is a luminous arrow pointing in the direction of growth. But how do we distinguish a true sign from mere chance? How do we know if the universe is truly speaking to us, or if it's just the mind projecting meaning where there is none? The answer lies in the quality of the sensation. When a synchronicity is genuine, the body reacts before the mind. There is a slight expansion in the chest, a shiver, a pause in breathing. It is the physical recognition of the invisible. Jung believed that this type of event is the living language of the self, the unifying center of the psyche, which calls us back whenever we stray too far from wholeness. Coincidences, then, are not distractions, but course corrections. They are, as Jung said, love letters from the universe, written with the gestures of reality. Think of a fever. When the body is invaded by something harmful, its temperature rises. Discomfort is the method of healing. The fever is not the problem, it is the answer. Similarly, the collapse of a routine, the loss of something important, the insistent repetition of signals, all this is part of a self-regulating system of the soul. Life raises its symbolic temperature when there is something in you that no longer belongs to harmony. Chaos, therefore, is not punishment, but sacred fever. It burns away what is false, purifies what is essential, forces transmutation. And yet, there is a common mistake. Upon noticing the signs, many rush to act impulsively. They abandon jobs, break ties, make radical changes driven by the eagerness to correct something they haven't yet understood. But transformation doesn't begin with external movement. It begins with silence. Jung said that all authentic revelation requires stillness. It is necessary to stop and listen, not with the ears, but with the whole being. The universe doesn't shout, it whispers. And its whisper is so subtle that it can only be heard by those who cease the inner noise. Have you ever tried simply sitting in absolute silence? No phone, no music, no distractions. At first, it seems impossible. The body becomes restless, the mind protests, random thoughts multiply. But if you persist, something begins to change. Time slows down, boundaries dissolve, and what seemed like noise transforms into rhythm. It is at this point that the invisible begins to speak. The answers don't come as sentences, but as an inner recognition, a feeling of, this is it. The body relaxes, the tension dissipates, and a tranquil clarity occupies the space where there was once confusion. But what if the answer that emerges is too uncomfortable? What if what the universe is asking for isn't easy to accept? The truth is rarely gentle. It dismantles structures, challenges habits, and unmasks illusions. That's why, even after receiving the signal, many prefer to pretend they didn't see it. They revert to old patterns, convincing themselves that it's safer to continue as before. But the universe is patient and relentless. When the lesson is ignored, the signal returns, more intense. What was once a gentle nudge becomes an inevitable collapse, until resistance becomes impossible. There are curious accounts of people who experienced this in an almost miraculous way. One woman repeatedly dreamed of a train derailing. The dream was so vivid that she began to avoid traveling. One day, however, she needed to board a train for an unavoidable appointment. At the station, an unexpected delay prevented her departure. Hours later, the train she was supposed to take actually derailed. Was it chance? Or was the universe in sync with her intuition, trying to protect her? Jung documented dozens of similar cases, in which the unconscious seemed to anticipate external events in a symbolic way. The mind, at its deepest levels, is not separate from the world. It participates in the very fabric of reality. But what does this mean for us, who live immersed in noise, deadlines, notifications, and everyday fears? How can we perceive the silent messages of the universe amidst the modern chaos? The answer lies not in doing more, but in doing less, in allowing silence to become language again. Instead of frantically searching for signs, it's necessary to become a space where they can appear. Synchronicity cannot be forced. It happens when there is alignment between what you feel and what the universe wants to express through you. When there is coherence between the inside and the outside, the whole of life organizes itself like a mirror. However, recognizing the meaning is only the beginning. The real challenge begins afterward, acting according to what has been understood, because knowing and not acting is the same as not knowing. The universe doesn't demand speeches, it demands coherence. When you understand what needs to change, but refuse to change, the energy that once flowed begins to stagnate, and this stagnation sooner or later manifests as suffering. Life cannot tolerate lies for long, not even inner lies. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you truly followed the calling you feel? If you trusted your intuition, even without guarantees, even without anyone else's approval? This is where the journey becomes both dangerous and beautiful. Because acting in accordance with what is true means relinquishing control. It means abandoning the known script and accepting to be guided by the unseen. This doesn't mean passivity, but conscious participation. Life speaks, and you respond. It's a silent dialogue, a dance between what happens and what you choose. Each step taken with sincerity opens space for the next sign. Carl Jung believed that when an individual reaches this state of deep listening, the entire universe reorganizes itself around them, not by magic but by resonance. External reality adjusts to the inner vibration. It's as if the world recognizes, now he is ready, and then coincidences turn into confirmations, losses into liberations, chaos into rebirth. But one last question keeps emerging. What happens after silence speaks? What comes after understanding? Then comes the gesture. The inspired action, however small, is the seal of transformation. It is when the invisible becomes concrete, when the symbol translates into matter. And that is where the cycle closes. Learning ceases to be abstract and becomes life. Every time you act in accordance with perceived truth, the universe responds with harmony. Each step taken in alignment generates more synchronicity. It is a living correspondence, a current of meanings in motion. And then, for the first time, you realize you're not being punished nor tested. You're being shaped. The discomfort wasn't cruelty, but care. The chaos wasn't destruction, but reorganization. The universe never wanted to hurt you, only to awaken you. And when you finally awaken, you understand. The signs are not distant messages, but reflections of what is within you. The universe never spoke from the outside. It always spoke through you. And now that the silence has been heard, only one question remains. Are you ready to follow the path it has revealed? There comes a point when the whispers of the universe cease to be gentle. They become screams. Coincidences turn into shocks. Repetitions become crises. And what once seemed like simple discomfort becomes an irresistible force pushing you out of where you no longer belong. It's the moment when life, tired of being ignored, raises its voice and forces you to listen. Nothing fits anymore. The words of others sound empty, old certainties crumble, and there's a tension in the air that announces rupture. You feel something approaching, not a tragedy, but a revelation. Carl Jung said that what we resist most within ourselves is precisely what holds the key to transformation. When the universe seems to punish us, it is actually awakening us. The signs never come from outside. They spring from the deepest layers of consciousness, where forgotten knowledge resides. What we call destiny may simply be the wisest part of ourselves trying to guide us. External life is the theater where the unconscious stages its messages, hoping that one day we will recognize the script. The universe is not a distant entity. It is an extension of what you are. Every event, every person, every obstacle is a way for the self to try to remember itself. But do you trust yourself enough to listen to your own soul? Can you believe that intuition, that sudden and silent feeling, knows more than calculated reasoning? This is where many hesitate. The mind wants proof, maps, guarantees. The heart offers only a push. Go, and that's where the fear appears. Because following the inner calling means abandoning control, surrendering to the unknown. You realize the old path is over, but the new one hasn't even begun. It's like walking on a bridge that builds itself as you take each step. Nothing is safe, but everything is alive. It's the most dangerous crossing, and also the most necessary. Sometimes the universe creates extreme circumstances precisely to force you to trust. There are stories of people who, after losing everything, jobs, loves, identities, found a clarity they had never felt before. A woman who watched her house burn and among the ashes realized that the loss was the beginning of a freedom she dared not desire. A man who, after a serious illness, awoke to a simple joy, without reason. simply for existing. The collapse was the cure in disguise. The end was the rebirth. What if the same thing were happening to you right now, disguised as a crisis, chaos, or uncertainty? The universe speaks through collapse because it knows the ego doesn't listen any other way. When everything collapses, the noise disappears. The mind finally falls silent, and in this forced silence, something deeper takes over. It's ancient wisdom, the self that Jung spoke of, the center of being that observes everything without being confused by life's storms. It is this self that sends the signals, the dreams, the omens, the coincidences. It is this self that calls you back when you get lost in personas and expectations. The resistance, however, is fierce. Even when the call is clear, the ego tries to negotiate. I'll change, but gradually. I'll follow my heart, but only if it works out. I'll listen to the universe, but without relinquishing control. But the universe doesn't negotiate with fear. It expects total surrender. And while that surrender doesn't come, the signs intensify. The discomfort increases. The repetitions return. The body complains. Until in a moment of exhaustion, something breaks inside, and the surrender happens not by choice, but by yielding. Have you ever experienced a moment like that when you had no strength left to fight, and suddenly everything went silent? That's the turning point. The complete collapse of the ego is the opening of the heart. It's the moment when, instead of asking why, you start saying yes. And when you say that true yes, everything changes direction. The universe, which previously seemed like an adversary, reveals itself as an ally. Situations that once hurt you become bridges. The people who irritated you become mirrors of wisdom. Chaos reorganizes itself into a new balance. What seemed like coincidence becomes coherence. Nothing is accidental anymore. Everything is an answer. But this alignment is not static. It requires continuous presence. Every day you need to choose to listen again. With every decision, you need to remember who is guiding you, fear or spirit. Jung said that consciousness is a flame that needs to be fed with attention, otherwise darkness returns. Awakening is not a one-time event. It is a practice, the daily exercise of trusting the unseen, even when the mind demands proof. Are you willing to live like this, without guarantees but in truth? Every time you act in accordance with what you feel, even without fully understanding it, the universe responds with synchronicity. The right people appear, opportunities flow, doors open at the exact moment. It's a silent orchestra where everything seems to dance to the same beat, and that's when you understand. Life doesn't want to punish you. It wants to integrate you. It only makes you stumble when you walk out of rhythm. But this harmony brings a final test. Sometimes when everything seems to finally fall into place, something unexpected happens. A setback, a loss, a twist of fate. And for a moment, you feel the old fear returning. The mind tries to say, "It was an illusion. Nothing has changed." This is where the learning is proven, because the difference between the old and the new is not in what happens, but in how you respond. Awakened consciousness does not eliminate chaos, but understands it. The same fire that once burned now illuminates. Do you remember the first sign? That little discomfort that started it all? Well, it returns, but now with a different tone. It's no longer a warning, it's confirmation. The cycle closes. The initial pain has transformed into wisdom. What seemed like the end was just the beginning in disguise. And yet there's a silent tension in the air, an unspoken promise. Something is approaching, not destructive, but decisive. Because after listening to the universe, there's one step that still needs to be taken, that of conscious creation. The moment when you not only answer the call, but begin to co-create your own destiny along with it. But for that to happen, one last choice is necessary. To trust completely. To trust the flow, the body, intuition, the invisible. To trust that the same universe that destroyed you now rebuilds you. And then, at the very moment you accept it, silence returns, not as absence but as fullness. It is the sound of restored harmony. The observing consciousness and the responding reality have become one. The universe, after all, was never talking to you. It was always you trying to remember what you are, and yet something still pulsates, a vibrant premonition, like the wind before a storm. Because the journey doesn't end with listening, it begins with speaking. The next step will be the boldest, to manifest what has been understood, to create with the universe and not just follow it. And it is at this point, in this moment of suspended breath between the end and the beginning, that true transformation prepares to emerge. There comes a point when resistance simply gives out. The body stops fighting, the mind quiets down, and the soul, finally, breathes. After so many falls, signs, repetitions, and coincidences, you realize that there was never an external force against you. Everything that seemed like an obstacle was just the flow trying to realign you with your own essence. The universe, silently, always tried to guide you back to the point where everything begins, the moment you trust. Trusting is not giving up, it's allowing. It's letting life happen through you, without the constant need to prove, control, or justify. It's learning to dance with the unpredictable, instead of waging battle against it. Carl Jung said that the soul moves towards the whole, like a river that always finds the sea, even when it meanders among rocks and banks. Life wants to flow, and we only suffer when we insist on holding on to what is already leaving. The great lesson of everything said so far is simple. Stop forcing. Stop swimming against the current. Stop pretending to be something you're not. Instead, look around, breathe, and recognize what is happening now, right now, is the perfect setting for your learning. Nothing is out of place. Nothing is random. But can you truly accept this? Can you believe that even in pain, there is an intelligent purpose at work? That every encounter, every loss, every silence is part of a plan that leads you to an awareness of your own being? This is where understanding transforms into practice. The first application is simple, but it requires courage. Observe. Instead of reacting automatically to everything that displeases you, stop for a second. Breathe. Ask yourself, what is this moment trying to show me? If there is resistance, there is something to be understood. If there is pain, there is something to be released. If there is fear, there is something to be acknowledged. Life speaks all the time, but we only listen when we stop wanting to be right and start wanting to understand. The second practice is listening to the body. It is the wisest instrument you possess. If something hurts, feels heavy, or repeats itself, it's because it's asking for attention. Before medicating, correcting, or ignoring it, ask yourself, what does this part of me want to say? Jung believed that every symptom is a symbol, and every symbol is a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. By listening to the body with respect, you begin to translate the language of the invisible. Healing then ceases to be an event and becomes a living relationship with one's own being. The third practice is cultivating silence, not empty silence, but the kind that allows answers to arise naturally. Create moments without noise, without screens, without distractions. Sit in peace for a few minutes every day and simply feel what is there. The mind will try to fill the space with thoughts, but insist on remaining. Gradually, the internal noise gives way to something deeper, a presence that observes everything without judgment. This presence is the center Jung spoke of, the point of equilibrium where the universe and the individual meet. And then comes the most challenging stage, taking action. Understanding is useless if action doesn't accompany the new awareness. Synchronicities are invitations, not rewards. They show the way, but you still need to walk it. Take a step in the direction of what you feel is true, even if it seems uncertain. Don't expect guarantees. The universe doesn't reward waiting, it rewards movement. It's when you begin to live in coherence with what you believe that coincidences multiply, paths open up, and answers arise naturally. But acting in harmony with the universe isn't about seeking results. It's about acting with integrity. It's about moving because it makes sense, not because it will bring an advantage. It's about trusting that what needs to happen will happen at the right time. And when that trust becomes alive, everything changes texture. Life ceases to be a race and transforms into a dance. The days stop being repetition and become creation. Have you ever imagined what would happen if, starting today, you stopped fighting against what is? If you accepted the present moment as the master that it truly is? The natural flow of life doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to integrate you. When you align yourself with it, everything that once seemed chaotic gains meaning. Challenges don't disappear but transform into instructions. Pain ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a direction. Loss ceases to be punishment and becomes a passage. The soul, once fragmented, begins to pulsate again in unity with the whole. There's an old story about a disciple who asked his master what the secret to enlightenment was. The master replied, "Stop swimming." The disciple insisted, "But what will happen if I stop?" And the master smiled, "The river will take you exactly where you need to be." That's the essence of everything that's been said, the wisdom of the flow. Life knows the way. It's you who gets distracted trying to control it. Carl Jung viewed the individuation process, the path to becoming who you are, as the deepest form of reconnection with the universe. There is no separation between the psyche and the cosmos. They are expressions of the same energy seeking to recognize each other. Every time you act consciously, the universe reorganizes itself around you. Every time you deny what you feel, it sends stronger signals. Balance comes when the inner and outer finally agree. Now take a moment to breathe. Think about everything that has happened in your life up to this point. The failures, the joys, the losses, the encounters. They all form a perfect mosaic, built by an intelligence that knows you better than you know yourself. Nothing was in vain. Everything has brought you to this moment, this exact second in which you read these words. And this moment, too, is sacred. It is the gateway to the new, to an existence lived in harmony with what is real, not with what fear invents. The practice is simple, but it requires consistency. Observe, listen, be silent, act, trust, repeat. These 5 steps are not a technique, but a way of life. And if you follow them sincerely, you will realize that the universe is not a mystery to be deciphered, but a mirror to be remembered. The universe doesn't want you to believe in it. It wants you to experience it. It wants you to feel it flowing through your choices, your words, your breath. And when that happens, you won't need to look for signs anymore. You will be the sign. The truth, in the end, is simple. Stop resisting. Stop hiding. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Life is already happening right now at this very instant. And all it asks is your complete presence. If something within you has awakened, if some part of your being has recognized this message, allow that flame to grow. Apply what you have learned. Look at life with new eyes. Trust the signs, however small they may be. They are the language of infinity. And if this script touched you in any way, if any phrase resonated with you, let me know. Like this video, share it, comment, even anonymously if you prefer. Your voice is part of this universal dialogue we are building together. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. There is much more to be said, and the path that opens now is just the beginning of something bigger. Because the universe is still speaking. And this time, it speaks through you.